There are moments when silence feels heavier than struggle. You pray, you wait, you believe, and yet heaven seems quiet. No signs, no sudden changes, no clear answers. In those moments, it is easy to assume that nothing is happening, but divine silence does not mean divine absence. Often God is quiet, not because he has ignored you, but because the breakthrough has already been approved. When God speaks, he gives direction, but when God is quiet, he is executing what he already promised. Silence is not delay, it is confirmation. The decision has been made, the process has begun, and what is unfolding no longer requires repeated announcements. It requires patience and trust. Think of the seed planted in the ground. Once it is buried, there is no noise, no movement you can see. Yet everything necessary for growth is already in motion beneath the surface. Roots are forming, strength is developing, timing is aligning. The silence of the soil does not mean the seed is dead, it means it is growing. God often becomes quiet when preparation replaces instruction. You asked for clarity, and he gave it. You asked for direction, and he showed you the path. Now the silence invites you to walk forward without needing constant reassurance. Faith matures when it continues, even when the voice is no longer audible. There are battles you don't hear because they are already being won. There are doors opening quietly, systems shifting silently, hearts being influenced without your awareness. God does not always announce his work. Sometimes he completes it quietly so that when it manifests, it cannot be questioned. Silence also protects the promise. Not everything God is doing needs commentary. Some blessings require privacy to mature. If every process were loud, it would invite interference. God shields certain breakthroughs with silence so they can arrive intact. When heaven is quiet, it is often because heaven is busy. Busy aligning timing, busy rearranging circumstances, busy preparing you for what you prayed for. What you are waiting on is not forgotten, it is being finalized. God's silence teaches trust beyond emotion. It teaches you to rely on what he said, not what you feel. Faith that depends on constant signs is fragile. Faith that rests in silence is strong. Do not rush the quiet season. Do not mistake stillness for denial. The approval has already been signed. The release is already scheduled. The manifestation is only a matter of time. Remain faithful. Stay prepared. Keep your heart steady, because when God breaks the silence, it will not be with another promise, but with fulfillment. When God is quiet, it does not mean he is absent, uninterested, or unwilling. Silence is often misunderstood as delay or denial, but in the language of faith, silence can be confirmation that the work has already moved beyond discussion and into execution. There are seasons when God speaks loudly to guide, correct, or redirect, and there are seasons when he becomes quiet because guidance has already been given and the outcome has already been decided. Divine silence often follows divine approval. Once a decision has been made in the spiritual realm, constant explanation is no longer necessary. God does not repeat himself out of insecurity. His quietness can signal confidence in what he has already set in motion. When instructions have been given and alignment has been established, silence becomes a sign that it is time to trust rather than question. Many people expect God to speak most when they are anxious, but anxiety often arises when trust is tested. Silence exposes what the heart truly relies on. If faith depends only on constant reassurance, it remains fragile. God's quietness invites maturity. It calls for faith that rests not on feelings or signs, but on conviction and relationship. In preparation seasons, God often reduces noise to increase focus. Breakthroughs require internal alignment before external manifestation. Silence strips away distraction. It forces reflection. It reveals whether faith is rooted in truth or emotion. When God becomes quiet, it is often because he is working deeper than surface-level answers. There are moments when God's silence protects the process. Not every stage of preparation is meant to be explained. Some things must grow unseen to remain secure. Just as seeds develop underground before breaking through soil, approvals are often hidden before results appear. Silence keeps the process undisturbed. God's quietness also teaches patience. Patience is not passive waiting, it is active trust. It resists the urge to interfere prematurely. Silence teaches restraint. It reminds the heart that timing matters as much as intention. Breakthroughs released too early can collapse under pressure. God waits until structure, character, and capacity are ready. Silence also reveals whether trust is conditional. When God speaks, faith feels easy. When he is quiet, faith becomes intentional. This is where belief matures. God is not obligated to speak constantly to prove his presence. His faithfulness does not depend on volume. There are answers God gives once, expecting obedience to carry the rest. Repetition is not always reassurance. Sometimes it is distraction. God's silence may be saying that the answer has already been given and now action is required. Faith moves forward even when confirmation is absent. In moments of silence, doubt often grows louder. The mind fills gaps with fear, assumptions, and impatience. But silence is not permission for doubt. It is an invitation to stillness. Stillness quiets internal noise, so faith can remain steady. God's quietness does not stop his activity. In fact, some of his most significant work happens in silence. Alignment is adjusted. People are positioned. Circumstances are shifted. What feels like waiting is often orchestration. Silence does not equal stagnation. Breakthrough approval often precedes visible change. The spiritual decision comes before the physical manifestation. Silence exists in that gap. This gap tests belief. It separates those who trust outcomes from those who trust God. Silence also guards against pride. Constant revelation can inflate ego. Quiet seasons humble the heart. They remind people that faith is not about control or prediction, but surrender. God remains God even when he does not explain himself. When God is quiet, it is not a punishment. It is not rejection. It is not abandonment. It is often the calm after instruction and before execution, a pause that signals readiness rather than resistance. Silence sharpens spiritual awareness. It encourages listening beyond words. Trust deepens when it no longer depends on sensation. Faith becomes anchored rather than reactive. God's quietness also builds resilience. It teaches the heart to stand firm without constant reinforcement. This resilience is necessary for sustaining breakthrough once it arrives. What God releases must be carried with wisdom and stability. When approval has been granted, excessive explanation becomes unnecessary. God's silence says, "I have heard you, I have decided, now walk in trust." This trust honors the relationship more than constant questioning. Silence is not the absence of God's voice. It is the evidence that his word has already been spoken. And when the time is right, results will speak louder than words ever could. When God becomes quiet, many people assume something is wrong. They interpret silence as absence, delay, or even rejection. But spiritual silence is often the most misunderstood season of faith. God's quietness does not mean inactivity. In fact, it often signals that work has already begun beyond what the human eye can see. Silence requires trust. It removes the comfort of constant reassurance and forces faith to mature. When God speaks frequently, people rely on words. When God becomes quiet, people must rely on relationship. This shift is intentional. It moves faith from dependence on emotion to dependence on conviction. In seasons of silence, God is often aligning circumstances, people, and timing simultaneously. These alignments cannot be rushed or explained in fragments. Speaking too early would create confusion rather than clarity. Silence protects the process. It prevents premature action that could disrupt what is being prepared. Many breakthroughs require multiple moving parts, decisions made by others, doors opening in places unseen, obstacles removed quietly, resistance softened gradually. God works across time and space, far beyond individual awareness. Silence allows him to operate without interference. Silence also tests motivation. It reveals whether faith is rooted in outcomes or obedience. When answers are delayed, intentions are exposed. Are prayers offered only for results or out of trust? God's quietness separates commitment from convenience. Those who remain faithful without immediate response demonstrate depth. God's silence is not emptiness. It is fullness unfolding privately. Just as seeds grow underground before breaking the surface, divine activity often happens where it cannot be observed. Growth below the surface is essential. Without it, visible results would collapse under pressure. In silence, God often strengthens internal foundations. Character is shaped. Patience is developed. Dependence on external validation is reduced. These internal changes are necessary to sustain future blessings. Without them, breakthroughs could become burdens rather than blessings. Silence also removes distractions. When constant direction is absent, people learn to listen more carefully. They become attentive to subtle guidance. Discernment increases. Faith becomes quieter but stronger. Trust becomes steadier, not reactive. There is also protection in silence. Some breakthroughs attract resistance before they manifest. God's quietness shields what is forming. Not every process is meant to be discussed or exposed. Silence preserves momentum by limiting interference. People often confuse silence with stagnation, but divine stillness is strategic. It creates space for alignment. It allows timing to mature. God's timing is not about delay. It is about readiness. Readiness of circumstances, readiness of people, readiness of the individual. In silence, faith learns to rest. Rest does not mean inactivity. It means trust without anxiety. It means releasing the need to control outcomes. God's silence often signals not absence but completion. When everything that needed to be decided has already been settled, there is no need for further discussion. At that stage, heaven is not negotiating, it is executing. This is where faith is tested most deeply, not when prayers are loud and answers are immediate, but when nothing seems to be happening, and yet everything has already been set in motion. Many people misunderstand divine silence because they expect constant reassurance. They want signs, confirmations, and repeated words. But approval does not require repetition. Once something is authorized, the process begins quietly. In the same way, when God has already approved a breakthrough, the work moves from declaration to development. Silence becomes the space where alignment is required. Waiting in silence exposes what a person truly trusts. When there is no new word, no visible change, and no emotional confirmation, faith either matures or collapses. This waiting is not passive, it is active trust. It is choosing to remain obedient, hopeful, and disciplined even when motivation fades. God's silence invites maturity, not anxiety. Alignment during silence matters. When the breakthrough is approved, behavior must match belief. Acting out of fear during waiting can disrupt preparation. Complaining can weaken endurance. Doubt can distort perception. Silence becomes a mirror, revealing whether faith depends on emotion or conviction. Those who remain steady in silence show that their trust is rooted in truth, not feelings. Silence also protects the process. Not everything that is approved is ready to be revealed. Premature exposure can attract interference, distraction, or discouragement. God often keeps quiet to shield what is still forming. This protection is not punishment, it is preservation. What is quiet is often sacred. During silent seasons, growth shifts inward. Character is refined, patience is strengthened, perspective is corrected. These internal developments are essential for sustaining what is coming. A breakthrough received without maturity can become a burden. Silence ensures readiness matches reward. People often try to fill silence with noise, seeking opinions, validation, or constant activity. But silence is meant to be honored, not escaped. It teaches listening beyond words. It sharpens spiritual awareness. In silence, subtle guidance becomes clearer. Intuition strengthens. Discernment deepens. Trusting silence also means resisting the urge to force outcomes. When God is quiet, forcing movement can lead to misalignment. Waiting does not mean inactivity, but it does mean restraint. It means continuing to do what is right without rushing results. Faith respects. When God is quiet, it does not mean he is absent. It means the work is already in motion. Silence is not denial. It is confirmation that the process no longer requires explanation. The delay you feel is not hesitation, but alignment. What has been approved in the unseen does not need constant reassurance in the seen. In this quiet season, trust is being strengthened, faith is being refined, and timing is being perfected. When the breakthrough arrives, it will not come as a surprise to God, only to you. Until then, rest in the silence, remain faithful in obedience, and hold steady in belief, because what has already been approved cannot be reversed.